Hey guys, hope you're doing well and caught the last part. So far we've only looked at public channels, which means anyone, even users that don't use our application, can connect to them channels. In this section we're going to look at an example where we connect to the user's channel, which will only deliver notifications to that user. And only that user will be able to connect to that channel. And you can use this to create any channels for any model type that you need to be private. Let's go over to our channel's root file and take a look at this channel here. We're not going to create a new channel. We're going to use what's already here to find out what is going on. Okay, so by default Laravel includes this private channel. Let's just have a look at what is going on here. So this is the name of the channel which we're going to switch up. And it includes this placeholder just inside of here. So inside of here, we'll always get the user who is trying to connect to this private channel. And we'll also get any of the parameters that are passed into the channel name. We'll take a look at another example in a minute without implementing it, but this is the kind of thing that we're dealing with. Now, I'm actually going to change the channel name over to users.id. I much prefer just a cleaner rather than referencing the actual model. And let's just go ahead and pull in the namespace for that user. Okay, so effectively when we connect to this channel, we're going to replace out this ID with the ID of the user who is trying to connect to the channel. We'll get the currently authenticated user through and we'll make sure that the ID of the user matches what we have passed in here. And you can see it's cast to an int. So these get compared properly. Okay, let's go ahead and try to connect to this channel and see what happens. So we're going to head over to our home. So let's go back over to our home and we'll just do exactly the same thing again. Just write some raw JavaScript out in here. So let's use echo to go ahead and connect to a channel. Now we don't want to use channel. That's what we did before when we joined a public channel. Instead, we want to use the private method to signify to echo that we need to connect to a private channel. And we'll see what happens behind the scenes with a network request when we do this. So let's go ahead and connect to users.1 and just see what happens. So let's head over to the browser, open up our console, and let's take a look at what is going on here. Okay, so I've given the page a refresh and everything looks like it's good. Before we dive into the network request, let's go ahead and try and connect to users, which isn't the ID that I've registered with. If we give that a refresh, you can see we get a 403 forbidden. So what echo is doing now that we're using the private method to connect to a channel? Is it sending a request to this endpoint within our Laravel application? What this endpoint will do is map this up to the channel that we're trying to connect to over in channels. It will run this closure, and obviously if we return false here, it's going to unauthorize it. So let's go ahead and look at that network request in more detail when we go ahead and actually provide the correct ID, and then we'll go ahead and start to broadcast to this private channel. Okay, so there we go. There's our successful auth request. We can see that all of that was okay. Now, you might be wondering what's the point in defining out this kind of channel when we're just returning a single true or false value? Well, with this we can add in some logic to check if we're allowed to access this channel or not. Let's take the example just really quickly of creating out a chatroom interface. So let's say that we had a chat room with a specific ID. We'd still get the user passed in, but this would now be the room ID. So let's call that room ID just so it makes a bit more sense. Now what you can do inside of here, and this is all in the Laravel documentation. If you want to go ahead and reference it, is create out an if statement to explicitly stop the user accessing a room if they can't access it. So once you implement roles and permissions or any kind of logic in your application to allow a user into a room or to perform a certain action, you can just define all of this out in here. So the example from the Laravel documentation is something like this. We would say something like user, which we now have, can access room, and then we can pass in the room ID. So if they can't access that room, then we want to return false. Otherwise, we want to return true. So it's kind of like just a standard authorization, but now within a channels. So that's the kind of thing that we want to do. We're not going to implement just that just yet because we have other courses that cover that. But for now we know that only this specific user can connect to this channel. Now before we go, how do we actually pass this in? Well, it's entirely up to you however you're building your application. Because we're just working within a blade file here. All we really need to do here is just output the currently authenticated user's ID. So now that will be directly passed into here, it will authorize it, and of course we can now connect. If someone was to go in and try and change this value or manually try and connect to this private channel using a different ID, it wouldn't allow them in because over in channels we're performing this here. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense with private channels. Let's build out something a little bit more useful where we can dispatch to these private channels. Now that we've defined, authorized, and connected to our private channel, it's time to send an event through. Okay, so we know how to do this already. Let's go ahead and create out an event. And we are going to make this an order dispatched event. So let's go ahead and create out an event called order dispatched. And we already know how to broadcast this. Let's go over to our web routes, and that's to find out a route to do this like we did in the last section. Okay, let's go ahead and broadcast this new order dispatched event. And what do we need to be able to actually dispatch this? If we think about it inside about channels, we need to know which channel we are broadcasting to, and that needs to have the user's ID within that channel. So with that in mind, we need to pass through the user into here so we can extract the ID out and broadcast the correct channel. So let's go ahead and grab out just my user. And of course, this would depend on the order that had been dispatched. And let's accept this into our constructor. So for now, we'll just go ahead and set this as a public property without modifying the contents of the broadcast. But we already know how to do that. Okay, so now that we've done this, let's come down to our channel section. And by default, this is set to a private channel. Great, we don't need to change anything there. But we do need to broadcast to the channel name that we've given, which includes adding in the user's ID. So instead of this being a hard-coded value like chat, we want this to be a dynamic value depending on the model that's passed in. So let's go ahead and say this user ID. Now we know that we're broadcasting specifically to the channel that user is potentially listening on, and that will include their ID. Okay, let's go ahead and try this out. So we're going to go over and go to that broadcast route that we just defined. We won't see anything yet because we're not listening at the moment, but if we head over to our server, we should see that we've subscribed to this, and we'll eventually get our event in here when we're listening to it. So you can see now we've got an auth token. So that was the difference before. And we know that we are broadcasting to users.1. You can ignore the private prefix because all of that is handled when we use the channel name within this just here. So this will automatically prefix this with private for us. Okay, let's go ahead and listen for this event then. So the syntax here is exactly the same. We listen on a private channel to the order dispatched event, and then we go ahead and introduce our closure. We still get any of the event data through that we've passed through. And for now, let's just go ahead and console log out that event. Great. Okay, if we head over, give everything a refresh and try that, we should see this roll in. Now we don't at the moment. That is just because we have forgotten to include the implemented interface to actually broadcast this. So let's say implements should broadcast now. Again, you can queue this. This is the type of notification that you could queue because it's not an immediate thing that needs to be sent right now like a chat. Okay, let's try this out one more time. And there we go. So we've got all of the details about the user. And of course, we already know how to pass additional models in and structure the data how we need. For now, we'll just go ahead and leave this as it is. Okay, so let's go over to our dashboard and let's do something useful for this. We delete the existing code in the car body section and give it the ID. And we come to our script section, and after we listen the event, we display order has been dispatched in the car body. Okay, if we come over, we don't see anything on the page, but as soon as we hit this, when the event rolls in, it will set that to dispatched. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit more useful by actually creating out an order model. So let's make out a model in here, and we'll call this order, of course. Let's create a migration and a factory for this, and let's fill in some of the data that we need. So let's go over to the create orders table migration. We know that an order needs to belong to a user, and this is important because we're going to be changing this up soon to authorized should we actually send this to the person who owns the order. Let's add a foreign ID in here for the user ID, and we'll constrain that. And we'll just leave it at that, but obviously this would contain any of the order details that you have. So let's run our migrations, and let's immediately go into Tinker just to generate our fake order. So let's go into App, Models, and Order. Let's go and grab out the factory that we created. And let's create this out using our user ID. So now we own that order. Okay, once we've created that, we now have an order that belongs to us. And if we head over to the web routes, we can now pass this in so we can get some of them order details. So let's pass in order 1 and let's accept this into order dispatched. So let's create out our order in here to receive in, and there we go. What we can now do is show any of the information about this order in here because we are sending this down with the event. And then down here we can output some information about that order. And that should now contain all of the information that we need. Let's go ahead and try and run this. And there we go. Order 1 has been dispatched. Global event on a dashboard. You could use this for stuff like notifications globally in your application. In a bit, we're going to look at having a specific orders page where we listen on a channel for that order only. But for now, at least we now know how to broadcast through to private channels, send the data down, pick it up and display it. So far within Echo, we've only been listening to a single event, but we can actually listen to multiple events on a specific channel. Let's go ahead and create out another event to signify when order has been delivered. So let's make out an event here and we'll call this order delivered. We'll do everything that we are used to doing. So let's head over to order delivered. Make sure that we implement should broadcast now or should broadcast if you're queuing. And we know that we want to accept the same data into here. We need the user because we need to know which channel is being sent on and we need to know the order. Here as well. And when we look at specifically broadcasting on an orders channel, we're not actually gonna need to pass this user in later because we'll know the user ID from the order. Okay, let's broadcast on the users channel. So let's say users. And let's pass in the user ID. Like so. Okay, great. So now over in web, we're going to simulate a few delays to these notifications coming through. So I'm going to sleep here for 3 seconds and then down here I'm going to sleep for 5 seconds and then I'm going to send through the new order delivered notification. Okay, so now that we're doing that, how do we listen to multiple channels or how do we listen to multiple events on the same channel? Well, we can just chain onto this. It works in exactly the same way. So we can grab everything that we've already done and we can listen to both of these events on this single channel. So this is now the order delivered event. Okay, so remember we've added that delay. So let's go over and send this through, let that run in the background, and we should after a few seconds see that dispatched. And then after 5 seconds we'll eventually end up with the order has been delivered. So both of these coming through when they happen and contains all of the data you need to display these type of notifications. Let's change things up and do a couple of extra things. The first thing that we're going to do is broadcast to another channel. So as well as broadcasting this globally to the dashboard, we're also going to broadcast it to a specific order page. Think about if you had a user sitting on an order page waiting for a status update, it would roll in there as well as maybe a global notification. Kind of like what we've done here. The second thing that we're really focusing on here is how to authorize in a slightly different way if we are listening on a specific models channel. So let's go ahead and change things up. Before we do anything, let's create out a new route here and we will create out orders route. We'll just do this. All in line for now. And let's take an order into here and render out an order view. So if we go ahead and make out a view here and we'll call this order and we're going to pass that order that we get through in here down to that view so we can do something with it. So let's pass that order down. Just imagine we're building out a page where the user can see a specific order. Okay, so let's go ahead and duplicate this tab over and we'll go over to orders/1 and we shouldn't see anything. Let's go and just grab our home template and we'll paste it over to that new order.blade.php file that we created. So up here, we're going to say something like the order ID. Let's output that. And now the user should have an orders page that they can listen on. And we're going to be doing exactly the same thing as we did here. We're listening to multiple channels. Okay. Let's head over to our channels file and we'll define out a new channel in here specifically to listen on an order. So we'll call this orders and let's go ahead and specify this as order ID so it's a little bit clearer. We'll pick that up inside of here. We know that because we're going to authorize on a private channel, we'll always get the user ID in here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is always return true at the bottom here and then just use defensive programming to return false if this order doesn't belong to this user. So if a user is trying to listen on an order that they don't own, don't authorize them. So how do we do this? Well, we could go ahead and fetch out the order model using the order ID and compare the order ID's user ID to this user. So to do this, we can grab the user's ID and if it doesn't equal, and let's fetch Find or new, because find or new will always give us back an empty ID. If it doesn't exist and we pass in that order ID, then we can grab the user ID from that. Now if that doesn't match, we're going to return false and we not going to authorize them. And feel free to implement any method here to check this. We just want to make sure it works. Okay, so now that we have defined the channel, we can go over to our events that we created. So order dispatched. And we can provide a different channel in here. So remember, we can define multiple channels. So we also want to broadcast on orders, and then we need the order ID. So let's just pass in the order ID. Okay, we'll do the same thing for the other event that we defined, order delivered, and we'll just paste this in here. Okay, great. So we're now broadcasting on 2 different channels. Let's go over to our orders page and just tidy this up, and then we should be good. Okay, so we're listening on orders, but now we need to replace this out with the order ID that we passed down to this template. And we're listening for the exact same events and doing exactly the same thing. Okay, let's see if this works, and if we've made any mistakes, we can fix it up. So we're going to go ahead and broadcast this. We'll head over. We should see both of these roll in, and you can see they both come in here on different channels, and the same for the next event after 5 seconds as well. So now we've used a completely separate model to authorize on that channel using the order ID, but slightly changing around the way that we define them. You could keep this channel for just global notifications for that user, and this specifically for an orders page if you wanted to. Now just before we go, we can do a little bit of tidying here just to make our events a little slimmer. So if we head over to our events that we've created, let's start with dispatched. What we can actually do is get rid of passing the user through, because from the order we already know the user ID. So let's get rid of the user and let's change this up to say order and user ID. So a lot more efficient. We're not parsing in a model that we don't need. If we want to broadcast on this channel, we can grab the user's ID. Let's do the same thing for order delivered as well. So let's say order and user ID, and let's go and get rid of the need to pass the user through here as well. Okay, so over in our web routes where we're dispatching this, we can obviously change this around to get rid of the user. And we should be good. Okay, let's head back over, try this out. So give both of these a refresh, rebroadcast this, and just wait for the events to come through. And both of them are now coming through. Great. In the next section, we will discuss the presence channels. To not miss new tutorials, click the subscribe button and activate the bell.